Jim says, "This is the first of the Dresden Files stories chronologically, and it was the first time I tried to write down short fiction for the professional market. I originally put it together as a class assignment at the University of Oklahoma's professional writing program more than 2 years before Stormfront found a home at ROC. This one won't win any awards because it is, quite frankly, a novice effort. It was perhaps the third or fourth short story I'd ever written, if you include projects in grade school. I had barely learned to keep my feet under me as a writer, and to some degree, that shows in this piece. Certainly, the editors to whom I submitted this story seemed to think it wasn't up to par for professional publication, and I think that that was a perfectly fair assessment. Read this story for what it is: an anxious beginner's first effort meant to be simple, straightforward, fun. And so I like how Jim Butcher kind of acknowledges, he didn't use that note to be like, well, I showed them, I
No.
made this awesome series, and it's like, well, that's true. It's like he's like, it was like my one of the first things I did
Yeah.
before actually making, or he had written the Dresden Files, but it was one of the first things he had done before like publishing it, and as he was getting his foot in the door. And I think it takes a lot of humility on his part, and it shows his character to say, you know what, they were probably right for
Yeah.
turning this down because it wasn't my best work.
Yep.
And I really appreciate that. And he just wanted to include it because it's part of the Dresden Files timeline, and he just wanted to give it to us readers, even though he knows that it's not his best work. And I think it shows in little things like you can tell a little bit how he's evolved over the years, where his story structure is much more not complicated, but the puzzle pieces fit together in more intricate ways. And he tends to foreshadow things a lot better now. And I think that Faith as a character was kind of is probably what he's referring to when he says that it was a novice effort, because although I liked Faith, you could tell that she's supposed to be like 9 years old and she's not really acting like a 9 year old. She would probably have been better written as like a, I don't know, 13 or 14-year old
Yeah.
or something like that. But yeah, what'd you think of this story? Any thoughts on a restoration of Faith?
Yeah. I mean, I would totally agree. It was nice to hear that from him. And again, it was just, he did it for us, right? He did it
Mm-hmm.
for the reader. That's just plain and simple why it came out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I liked it. And I liked Faith, and I would agree, she was pretty mature for a, 7 or 8 year old or whatever. But I liked the story. It's just cool to see Harry back kind of in the beginning,
Yeah.
at Ragged Angel, and seeing, because he mentions that several times throughout the series.
Yeah.
And also, like, our first ever encounter with Harry encountering like a magical beast or whatever.
Right.
That was super cool.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I enjoyed it. It was just a nice nod, you know.
Yeah. The last thing I want to mention with this short story is what he says to Faith at the end there when they're stuck in that little nook. Let me see if I can find it here in the book. I don't know if I have like an actual quote that I specifically liked, but I liked this whole moment where she kind of admits that her parents aren't very good parents, and
Yeah.
that they kind of like neglect her and stuff. And then
Yep. She says something like, uh, maybe this is the quote you're looking for too just now, but she's like, yeah, my parents, I'm like fine china. I get taken out when
mm,
people are over, and I get put away when, we're alone or whatever.
yeah, that's a great part of it for sure. Yeah, she's kind of neglected, and her parents are just like these wealthy parents who um from what I understood from what Harry was saying is they wanted her to appear they wanted it to appear as though she was kidnapped because that raises their like social standing with
Yeah.
their friends, like, oh, our daughter got kidnapped, and
Yeah.
like they wanted a ransom.
The
And
wow factor.
yeah, exactly. um and so I like that moment where she's like, I can't go back to them. Like, I just hate living there. And Harry pulls a ring off his finger and he like makes it glow and he puts it
Yeah.
on her hand and he's like, think of like the best moment that you've ever had. And she's like, well, my grandma, when I was young, she would come over on Christmas Eve and we would stay up late and she would let me open one present
Yep.
and we would talk and giggle all night and tell stories. And then Harry like pulls his hand away and the ring is glowing.
Yeah.
And oh man, it's just such a
And
good moment.
and he's like, remember when, when times are tough, there's always some light out there. Just remember this. Yeah, you should try and find it, dude. It's
Yeah,
so
I
good.
think I
It's
think
so good.
yeah, okay, so I'll start back here. She looked up at me, studying my face, my eyes. I shied away from the perception of that gaze. I need to go back, don't I? She asked. I brushed a stray bit of hair from her forehead. There are people who love you, Faith, or who one day will. Even if you can't see them beside you right here, right now, they're out there. But if you let the dark get into your eyes, you might never find them. So it's best to keep a little light with you along the way. Do you think you can remember that? She nodded up at me, her face lit by the light from the ring. Whenever it gets too dark, think of the good things you have, the good times you've had. It will help you, I promise. She leaned against me and gave me a simple, trusting hug. I felt my cheeks warm up as she did. Aw, shucks. And I think that was actually the big blocky one. That was the quote I was looking for because I really liked this idea of, but if you let the dark get into your eyes, you might never find them.
Yeah.
Talking about how, there may not be someone who like specifically loves you right now, but there will someday be.
Yeah.
And if you take this darkness that you're feeling now, if you take this depression that you're feeling now and you carry that with you, you're never going to see the people who will eventually
That's right.
love you.
Yep.
And it makes me think of like going through a breakup. I was thinking about this a lot today, or yesterday. So, after a breakup, there's been times where I have just completely shut down and not wanted anything to do with anybody. And like I let the dark into my eyes, so to speak.
Yep.
And I missed the things that were happening around me, or the other, months down the road, I may have missed, another girl that was interested or something. Matter of fact, I know for a fact I did. And, not just in the form of like relationships, but I feel like that can be with anything. If you
Yeah.
let something, darken your eyes too much, you can miss the things that are good in the future.
Yep.
And I think as humans, our tendency is to like hold on to that because we feel safe in that shadow and we feel safe in like our misery a little bit. But the fact is, that is kind of protection for a little while. But if you hold on to that for too long, you're going to miss good things
That's
down the
right.
road
Yep.
completely. And so, yeah, that really struck a chord with me. Not to go, I know I went super deep with that,
No,
but
it's all good.
that's
And can you also imagine like hearing that when you're, 9 years old and you're going through like a really rough time?
I wish
Life,
somebody had
life
told me.
changing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Life changing, man.
Yeah, that was a lesson that I learned far too late. So yeah, last thing I'll say about this is at the very end, I love this whole quote, especially the way Marster says it in the audiobook. Modern living might suck, and the world we've made can be a dark place, but at least I don't have to be there alone. I put an arm around Nick's shoulder and grinned. It's like I keep telling you, man, you've got to have faith. And I just feel like this is such a theme of the Dresden Files. Like, he says that in so many books where you know, he's like, we're going through a dark time right now, but I have my friends that I can count on, and I
Yep.
have these people that I can lean on. And, he always has faith that things are going to get better.
Yep.
He's kind of like cynical without being doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think at the end of this thing, everything he said there, that whole piece of text, I feel like that's very much the theme of the Dresden Files.
Totally.
All right, so next up we have the Warrior
Ooh,
This is
here
a
we go.
novelette from Mean Streets, and it takes place between Small Favor and Turncoat and before Last Call. Jim says, "Once upon a time when moving." Oh, dude, this is my favorite note, dude. I
Okay, I'm
loved
ready. I'm
I
ready. Let's
loved
hear it.
this so much.
Let's hear
Okay, I have so much to say about this note.
it.
Jim says, "Once upon a time, when moving into a new neighborhood, I spent a few days meeting the new neighbors. Nothing big, just visits to say hello, introduce myself to the other family with children my son's my son's age, another family with a high school age daughter who often babysat for the other families on the street, the usual sort of thing. I had a bunch of innocuous interactions with them that didn't look like anything special at the time. Fast forward 5 years, over the next few years, I came to learn that some of the most inane, unimportant little things I had done or said in the time in that time had impacted several of my neighbors in enormous ways. Not necessarily good or bad, but significantly and generally in a positive fashion, or so it seemed to me. If I'd chosen different words to speak or timed my actions only slightly differently, it might well have altered their lives, and if I hadn't been paying close attention, I might not have realized it happened at all. It was my first real life lesson in the law of unintended consequences and the basis of my belief that big, important things are built from small and commonplace things, and that even our little acts of petty, everyday good or evil have a cumulative effect on our world. A lot of religions make a distinction between light and darkness and paint portraits of dramatic battles between their champions. But maybe the fight on the ground is a lot more common than we ever really think. It happens every day, and a lot of the time we might not even be aware that it's going on until 5 years later, I guess. Our smallest actions and choices matter. They tell us about who we are. That was the idea I tried to carry into The Warrior. That and the idea that what seems like a good thing or a bad thing might not be either, seen from another point of view. Many readers were upset with Michael's fate at the end of Small Favor, how horrible that a character who is basically so decent got handed such a horrible fate, being shot and crippled for life by the champions of hell itself. What a tragedy that he couldn't continue the fight. Judge for yourself how tragic it was for him. And dude, I literally listened to that note like in the audiobook. I listened to it like over and over, like at least
Yeah.
like 3 times because I I love I love this idea and I believe in it so much that the little things you do day to day can completely change like how somebody sees you or how
Yeah.
they see life or whatever. And I've had times where somebody's like tiniest word of encouragement or something just like completely changed my outlook on a particular thing, or just one person being like kind in a moment, or me being kind in a moment, led to some like bigger friendship or whatever.
Yeah.
And even thinking back to like how you and I met, like I just like I took you on a ride in my car and we just
Yeah.
like hung out for a day,
Yep.
because I was like, oh yeah, I'll just take him to like go to the mall or whatever. And then we ended up hanging out and talking a lot more, and then we became the friends we are today.
Yep.
And you think about those just like little actions, and then even looking back on your life, certain relationships that you're in, like if you had never like if you had lived on the other side of like the peninsula or something and never gone to Red Apple as a daily part of your
Yep.
shopping and whatnot, you would have never met your fiance.
Yeah.
And so it's like, man, just like the little things like that, they all add up. And I love that Jim Butcher, like, I guess recognizes that and then wrote a whole story about it. I love the Warrior so much.
Me too.
So then he runs into Kelly at the what were they playing? Soccer, baseball, like, oh,
Soccer.
soccer. Okay.
Yep.
Um, and he tells her about she's sitting there because she thinks that she's screwing everything up. She's making the
Oh,
team
okay. This is
lose
the little
games.
girl, right? That was
Yeah,
she was crying behind the stands.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. And Harry sees her and goes back. All right.
yeah.
Yep.
And he sits down with her, and he's like, did they make you read Great Expectations
Yeah.
in school by Dickens? And he tells her about the widow. I forget the widow's name, but he tells her about the widow from that story where she basically, her husband died and she sat inside watching the rest of the world from
Mm,
her living room and refused to leave and just kind of watched the world go by. And he's like, she missed out on so many things because she wasn't willing to go have new adventures or
yep.
to try. Even though something failed, you still need to try because the next thing might not fail.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you don't do anything, then nothing is ever going to happen, which I think is um, a good lesson for anybody. I've definitely had times where I'm like, well, I'm just not really on the dating scene right now, having gone through, a lot of like tries and failures or
Mm-hmm.
breakups or whatever, or, someone turning me down or whatever. And it's like, I don't know why I keep bringing this back to dating. It's just the most relevant thing to me, I
Yeah.
guess. But it's like, no, you have to still keep trying, because then
Right.
if you don't go and like try to date,
It's
if you don't go and
it's
like ask people out, then you'll never get anywhere. Then you'll never get married or whatever your
that's
goal
right.
is,
That's right.
you know?
And the argument is it's the one time that you decide to not put yourself out there could be the time that solved
Yes.
everything,
Right?
right? That's
Yes.
it.
That's so
Yeah.
true. And so I love I love Kelly. She's like she's like, dear God, you just made Dickens relevant to my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And you don't really think about that when they make you read all those kind of books
No,
in
yeah.
school. And
Did you
like,
read Dickens?
I don't think I read Dickens
We never had
specifically,
to, yeah.
but
We read, yeah.
I read like Tom Sawyer and
Tom
stuff like
Sawyer,
that.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I never read Dickens, but I think, those books, um I really don't know if school is doing the kids any favors by having them read those books at such an early age, because
I
they're
don't think, dude, from what I understand, I don't think they do that anymore.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that they, yeah, I think nowadays it's stuff that was made in this day and age for exactly to be set in a middle school.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good, because I know, like, I came away from those stories, like To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, I came away from that liking the story, but not coming away with any like life lessons or anything.
Totally. Yeah.
Um,
Just because written so long ago. And now it'd be like 100 and, a
yeah,
100 years ago, right? Like,
yeah, something like that.
yeah.
And yeah, so I think, hopefully, yeah, they're giving the kids more modern stuff that's more relevant. But like Harry says, he's able to take this situation from Great Expectations
Yep.
and turn it into something that's relevant to her life. And so yeah, I really like that scene. That was really touching. Anytime Harry is making a kid feel better.
Yeah.
um
And
Definitely
another
awesome.
thing that popped out at me during this was that, and I can't remember exactly what was saying or what the situation was, but she was talking about how she couldn't, she could never get the goal or could never do anything right. And Harry in his monologue was like, man, if only the times were such where that's what I was worrying about.
Oh yeah,
And
for
it was just like
sure.
it was refreshing to see like, a child's perspective on life because I remember
Yeah.
being just like that.
Oh
Like
yeah.
if I can't do this, I'm not worth it. Or if I can't do this, then I'm not good to anybody. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's to us now, it's kind of a joke. It's like you're
Yeah.
gonna be just fine. You're
Right.
gonna be all right.
Yeah.
But it's always refreshing to see
It's so
uh
real to the kid.
so real. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's it. It is all that is it. There's
Yeah.
nothing else. It's
Yeah.
that. And we think about that as like, man, there's so much more.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just there's a sense of innocence with that is like very profound.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast this morning, It's one of my favorite podcasts. It's called Popcorn Culture. I recommend everyone go watch them. They're two brothers that just kind of talk about life, and they're very funny. But one of the brothers, he's got a son, and he he was saying that when he was a kid, he had like this lunchbox, like this metal lunchbox that he really liked, and he kept all this stuff in it that wasn't his lunch. It was all his like toys and stuff.
Yep. Pokemon cards. And
Pokemon cards,
yeah.
and he he had it like in the driveway or something, and there was a car, like a truck or something, that ran over it, and he was so upset. He was like probably like 6 or 7 or something. And he's just like crying and so upset that his thing just got crunched. And he says, I have to remember with my son that, or he's like, nowadays I would look at that and be like, it's just a lunchbox. I'll just buy a new lunchbox or whatever. He's like, I have to remind myself with my son now that to them, that is a very real thing that just happened. And that is a very like devastating thing that just happened. And like, even though the situation may be like completely like mundane, it's like, oh, we'll just get you a new box.
Right. But you
like,
understand how you felt when it happened to you.
Yeah.
And it had gravity to it.
Yeah, the emotions are very real. I thought that was kind of interesting. That's kind of what Harry's doing here.
That is cool. Yeah, cool.
I'll burn through these last couple notes. Harry sees Uriel again as Jake. He allows Harry to ask questions.
Uriel says, I don't really do this often, but go ahead, ask. I'll answer.
Right. Yeah.
And you're just like, damn, dude.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
And Harry's like, like why does God allow this kind of stuff to happen? And Uriel says, God wants you to have a good life and for good things to happen to you, but he won't gift wrap them for you. You have to make the choices that lead to those things. And it reminded me of the talk that Dresden had with Kelly under the bleachers. Like you have to make the choice to go back out and try again and redo that. And then it also reminded me of the talk that Harry had with Faith at the very beginning, where he's like, you can let darkness like cloud your sight and just
but then when that little bit of light comes, you might miss it.
Yeah, you'll miss it.
Yeah.
And so it seems like there's a kind of theme working through a lot of these, a lot of like choices and whatnot. And goes for good things to happen to you, but he won't gift wrap them to you. You have to make the choice to lead to those things. And then Jake confirms, or Uriel confirms, that if Harry had gone up first in the helicopter, he would have died there and Michael would have died on the island.
That's right. Yep.
And so the outcome that happened is pretty much the best.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought that was kind of interesting because I always wondered that too. I'm like, what if Harry had gone up? Would he have like been able to like lift a shield and like shroud himself? But Uriel's like, no, you would have died.
Yeah.
And then one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that Harry stopped Chuck the electrician from like he was like drinking on the job.
He was drunk as shit, and he went to work on this power box. But Harry, before he even got there, canceled out the power for the whole block.
Right? Yeah, he was like
Hexus that shit, dude.
Hexus that shit. But then Uriel tells Harry that because of Harry's small actions, he helped Courtney's mom, the girl with the soccer ball, realize that her daughter was being abused by the dad, and it stopped her mom from a lifetime of alcohol abuse, and it stopped a generational cycle of abuse of over 300 years in the making. Chuck the electrician, Harry saved his life that day. And in a few years, he would be able to donate his kidney to his daughter who had some sort of problem with her kidney.
Yeah.
And the family will be stronger and happier than they've ever been. And he will have presumably like quit drinking and stuff. And so I thought that was really cool. And then the 5 minutes of kindness that Harry shared with Kelly will push her forward to become a counselor helping thousands. And then Uriel says, because Harry had said, like Michael isn't a warrior anymore. Like he can't walk, he can't fight. And Uriel's like, do you think that warriors only fight in battle? Like,
Yeah.
do you think that's what we need from you to like physically fight on our behalf? And so he says all these things. He mentions Courtney and Courtney's mom and the family, and he talks about Chuck and the alcohol, and then Courtney and her going on to become a counselor. And he says, do you think you have not struck a blow for the light, warrior?
Mm,
And it's so cool because
yeah.
none of that shit had anything to do with Harry fighting a
Nope.
physical battle.
Nope.
And I love that quote so fucking much. But yeah. Yeah, this was just a fantastic book, dude, or a fantastic
Yep.
story. Like I teared up multiple times.
Oh,
And Uriel also mentions that Michael was a hairbreadth away from murdering the priest and
yes.
presumably falling from grace
That's right.
himself.
Just yes,
Or
dude.
like even misusing Amarachius, like what,
Yeah,
because
shattering the sword. Exactly. He was
he
using it to defend himself.
he had it in his other hand. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, what if he had pulled that thing and like killed the priest?
Yeah, it
He
would
could have shattered the sword.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I think so. Then he says like Harry saved Michael from losing himself,
Yeah.
and it's like just all these little actions. And yeah, I don't know, I love this
Dude,
one. I
yeah,
love this one so much.
good. And it's there's just so much that is like so profound with this entire story, dude. The whole entire thing.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. It's the one that made me feel the most for sure.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
And a big shout out to our first Night Angel tier patron, Shad Zaman. Thank you so much, man.